Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you're joining from. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here today. We are all set to have a conversation around agility and solopreneurship. So the importance and need for being agile while being a solopreneur. My name is Meenakshi Iyer, and I'm the founder and principal of North Star Solutions and Services, which is a boutique future of work-oriented consultancy that partners with mid-career professionals, especially culturally diverse mid-career professionals in the technology space, to help them, to support them in designing their transformation journeys, their professional transformation journeys. We also work with small and medium enterprises in designing and implementing their organizational transformation journeys. And I'm really grateful to the Global Entrepreneurship Network and the Global Entrepreneurship Network UK chapter, specifically Elaine, for inviting me to be a part of this. So my presentation today is part of the Global Fringe event. And today, in this week-long celebration, today is dedicated to resilience, agile ways of working, and founder well-being as part of the Global Entrepreneurship Week celebrations at the UK chapter. So I wanted to present my own experience with personal agility and organizational agility and how I've been able to use some of those lessons as a solopreneur. Feel free to use the chat window if you have questions or comments coming up. Yeah. Just a quick introduction about myself. So this is in a nutshell my life story, if you will. Born and raised in India, lived in different parts of the country before moving to the States about 12 years ago. So between India and the US, I've lived in more than 10 different cities, and my professional experience of more than 2 decades is split between the two countries. And I speak 4 languages. And my career is very interdisciplinary, ranging from technology implementation to healthcare and business process transformation, HR, coaching and training. In my current role at North Star, I'm a personal agility and a collaborative leadership skills coach. So I wanted to kind of center us, if you will, with this phenomenal quote: "Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished." This is something that, especially in the last more than 15 months as a solopreneur, this quote has helped me ground myself and really find the strength to carry on when things always don't go as planned. So just wanted to set us up with that. Some of you on this call may already be familiar with the concepts of agile, and so some of it may be a bit of repetition for you. But just to set the stage with what are we talking about, I really wanted to focus on 3 or 4 main things. One is understanding the basic constructs of agile from a software and product development perspective. And then looking at, I wanted to focus on 2 of the different, or 2 of the many practices under the agile umbrella, namely Scrum and Kanban, and look at what can we as solopreneurs learn from that. And then how might we adopt some of those Scrum and Kanban principles in our own ways of working, personally for us and also for our clients and our other partners and collaborators. Interestingly, by the way, Agile is celebrating its 20th anniversary. The celebrations have started. It's in February of 2001 is when the Agile Manifesto was signed and published. So it's coming up to 20 years. And another birthday, if you will, is that of Scrum. So that was the method of software development that was co-created by Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber. That was exactly 25 years ago. So just this week, the latest Scrum guide for 2020 was released on the 25th anniversary of Scrum. So just some pub trivia tidbits over there. Agile really is, this is in a nutshell, it's a mindset that is described by 4 values, defined by 12 principles, and then there are many different practices or ways of being agile, be it in software development or in business or in product development. So we're going to take a quick look at what these values and principles are, and then we'll look at a couple of practices, namely Scrum and Kanban. There are 4 key values in the Agile Manifesto as defined by the Agile Manifesto. And then the first one is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. That really brings out the human element, which is common to in the world of business as well, whether be it as us as solopreneurs or as entrepreneurs. If we have a team that we're working with, the focus is always on the human experience. The second piece, and again, remember that this is from a software development perspective. So it talks about working software over comprehensive documentation. And the way that I've seen it, and I've practiced it in my own solopreneurship journey, is really identifying what is the need that I'm addressing, and what is the quickest way for me to deliver some value, to show value to my potential clients. So instead of working software, I would say it's working product or working service. So in my case, for example, the easiest way for me and the most impactful way for me to show and create value for my clients was to provide one-on-one professional coaching services to my target audience, which is mid-career professionals, and in that specifically culturally diverse mid-career professionals who come from the world of technology, because that's where I come from as well. I'm a lean, agile, human-centered practitioner, human-centered design practitioner, and I understand very well the world of technology and what happens to the human experience in terms of clients and employees. And so addressing some of those gaps that I'd seen from my industry experience, that was the quickest way for me to show value. So that's how I interpret this second principle of working software over comprehensive documentation. So for in other words, I chose to do some things as opposed to, let's say, write about them or build out a website that had details about what I do. So I chose to engage in activity that actually showed some value for my potential clients. The third principle talks about customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And quite literally in my solopreneurship experience, the way it worked out for me is, going back to the one-on-one coaching, professional coaching services, when I started out with very simple, like a social contract, rules of engagement, like how often do you want to meet for coaching sessions? How long would each coaching session be? And having direct, clear conversations with my potential clients to understand what their real needs are, as opposed to dishing out my 6-page contract, if you will. And also, even when there is a signed contract, I pay attention to the overall human experience of my clients, and then set it up as a very collaborative relationship. And that's really worked well for me. The fourth principle is responding to change over following a plan. So it's more important to sense and respond as opposed to saying, okay, this is my plan and I'm going to stick with this. And another way of saying responding to change from a business perspective is responding to feedback. So it's always, and then you'll see that one of the pillars of Scrum as a methodology is inspect and adapt. And it comes from that. So always being aware, so that it goes back to self-awareness. It goes back to being present in all of your interactions, and always being open to feedback and open to learning, and in fact, seeking feedback. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So these are the 4 main values, if you will, as documented in the Agile Manifesto. And you'll see that all of these same values will bleed into the frameworks that we're going to talk about, namely Scrum and Kanban. And these are the 12 principles. There's no need for any of us to remember what they exactly are, but just to give you an idea of the 12 principles, this is how they play out. And the key again here is you'll see some basic values, human values pop out here as well, namely trust. And there is focus on sustainable development. So whatever you've started doing, the key is that you're able to do it over a long period of time. Most startups fail in the first 3 years, especially solopreneur ventures. And there are many reasons for that. And number one is in one of the Forbes articles that I recently read, it talks about the mismatch between the product or service and what the market need is. And that really goes back to how open you are as a solopreneur, as an entrepreneur, to market feedback, and how agile you are in inspecting and adapting. This is just all of the values and the principles put together as one. And this is a public document put out by the Agile Alliance. And this is available to everyone. And as you can see, the links down there in the slide as well. I'll be sharing the slides as a PDF after this, so you can have all of this information. So that's overall in terms of a quick snapshot of what is Agile. Look at the principles and the values behind the Agile Manifesto and how it started out in the world of software development. And mind you, this is, as we said at the beginning, this is more than 2 decades old. And a lot of this goes back to some of the principles come from the world of manufacturing as well, which is, if some of you may have heard of the Toyota production system that has origins in lean and just-in-time inventory and production. So so you'll see that how as the world has evolved and as we move through these different revolutions, if you will, and now we are in the 4th industrial revolution, which is all about data, and in a world where our physical and digital worlds are kind of blending and blurring, the boundaries are blurring. So as we move through these different eras, if you will, in the world of business and ways of working, there's always opportunity for us to look into how things have been and learn from that, and then adopt some of those principles and practices in how we work today and in the future. This is again a quick overview of Scrum, a house of Scrum, if you will. So as I mentioned earlier, that the pillars of Scrum are transparency, inspection, and adaptation. The ability and the infrastructure to constantly inspect and adapt, learn from your previous iteration, and put that back into the setting up that loop of learning and doing better with every iteration. And that's only possible if your systems, your people, your processes, and your tools enable transparency. And you'll see that the 5 values of Scrum: commitment, courage, openness, focus, and respect. Scrum teams typically are development teams that are usually anywhere between 3 and 9 people. And Scrum teams are self-organizing. It comes from the world of sport, rugby to be precise, scrimmage, and that's where the term Scrum comes from. And so the software development teams are, Scrum teams are self-organizing. They are autonomous in the sense that they choose the work that they will commit to for that particular sprint. And so basically it's like, think about a big project being chunked up into 2-week deliverables or incremental deliverables. So instead of looking at building out your, let's say you're building a website, instead of looking at the whole website as one project, how about you chunk it up? So what's the most important page or section of your website? Obviously your landing page, obviously your contact information, and how you want people to reach you, especially in today's world with everything being digital and almost all knowledge work being virtual. So what's the best way for people to reach you, and what are you all about? So those are the 2 or 3 main pages on the website that's most important. So identifying the your minimum viable product or MVP for every stage of your business, and then making sure that you are working towards that. So once you've identified that, you focus on that, and then you commit to doing that work, and then you are open enough to get feedback from your stakeholders or your tribe in general, and then you have that inspect and adapt loop. So that's pretty much Scrum 101, if you will. Yeah. Moving on to the next practice in the Agile world that I wanted to talk about is Kanban. Now, Kanban, again, it's a Japanese word that literally means a sign in a shop or a billboard. And it comes from the world of manufacturing. So there's a lot, if you can look up the Toyota production system and the work that was put in by Taichi Ono in that. So the main focus in Kanban is to visualize all of your work. Everything that's on your plate, visualizing that. And then figuring out what is it that you can really focus on. And that's your work in process or work in progress, that limiting that. So for example, in my business, I know that I can work on 2 public trainings or webinars on any given day. And if they are, let's say if it's a 4-week program, I can run 2 4-week programs at simultaneously. And I know that that's my limit. So how do I plan my work around that? That's something that I've learned from the Kanban practice and I adopted. The other thing is understanding flow. That's the other big piece in Kanban. What's the flow for your work? So what's the first thing that you need to do? So for example, if I'm planning a public webinar or this presentation, for instance, what are the 5 things I need to do before this presentation? What am I doing during this presentation? What do I need to do after? Understanding that flow. And then again, focusing on the feedback, being in touch with your customers and your, if it's a product, then people that are experiencing your product, being in touch with them, being open to feedback, and then working on your next round of improvements. So this pretty much is Kanban. The difference between Scrum and Kanban is, at least in my personal experience, when I was starting off with my Solopreneurship venture at North Star Solutions and Services, I took the Scrum approach to say, okay, what is my minimum viable product? And to be honest, 15 months ago, my minimum viable product was really a business card, because at that point, this is pre-COVID, and all of us were still doing in-person networking events. And for me, it was important to really have my pitch going, my elevator pitch, and I struggled with it. And this whole exercise of designing my business card really forced me to, because of the real estate that was available to me on a small business card. In fact, I have one here. So this was my first business card. And what I decided to do was use the real estate at the back of the card as well. And this much of real estate really forced me to think about, what is my MVP? What is the value that I'm offering to my clients? So I really took the Scrum approach in terms of, I didn't go, well, I did start like that. Okay, I need a website. But do I really need a website? Is that the first thing that I need? Or what else can I do? So really looking at what is the least that I need that will still bring value to my potential clients and still get me moving in the right direction. So when I first started, I approached it from a Scrum perspective and really broke down the beginnings of how I needed to set up my business into sprints. And I operated on weekly sprints, sometimes even daily sprints. And once I reached where I was able to set up my website, I actually worked on it every day. And then I reached out to a diverse group of people within my network to get inputs and their feedback on the website. And I was doing all this by myself for the first time, and I was doing it for the first time, of course. So I did a lot of learning on the job, if you will. Yeah. And then once I, 6 months down the line, 8 months down the line, for some of my projects, I'm mostly in the Kanban mode where I'm looking at, okay, if these are my 5 service offerings, how many of these can I uh, run simultaneously? How many individual coaching clients can I take on at any point in time? So for example, I always block off half an hour before and after every individual coaching session. That allows me to ground myself, clear my head, make sure that I'm completely available and in service for my client. So my work in progress process limit is maybe 3 individual coaching sessions per day. So I've realized that, I figured it out by trial and error. That's my work in process limit. So respecting that and then planning my day and overall my business around that. So Scrum really comes in when you're, and also in my technology experience, when it's a new product, new software development, Scrum approach comes in handy because you're really looking at delivering value incrementally. And when you're in maintenance mode and using a software and trying to improve on it, then taking the Kanban approach really comes in handy. So I'm going to pause here for a quick second. I see a couple of people have joined. I'm also going to take a quick look at the chat window. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I see a comment here. Yeah, Cressy, thank you. Yes, I just realized it. It was a lot of reflective learning for me when I realized how I went about it when I started off 15 months ago. All right. Any questions or comments so far? Otherwise, we can go back to the rest of the presentation. Okay, I take that as a no. All right. So, so far we've looked at Agile as a whole, and then we looked at Scrum and looked at Kanban. These are, again, really initial quick look at these concepts. So how do we really take it and practice it from a solopreneurship perspective? Yeah. So I want to go back to Scrum. What can we learn? One is the values, the 5 values of Scrum: focus, respect, openness, courage, commitment. What can we learn from that? This is what I have to offer. Focus on the purpose. In other words, what is the market need? What is a gap that you're trying to fill? So in my case, after a lot of trial and error, and again, it was an iterative process, and really, it's only about a month ago where I crystallized on what is a market need or gap that I'm addressing. In my experience and in talking to my potential clients and others, what I have found is when it comes to professional development, particularly in IT and software development, product development companies, there's quite a bit of support for new fresh graduates. There's support from the universities or their places of education, and there's also a fair amount of support within companies when they do campus recruitment and things like that. There's also quite a bit of support for senior leaders. There's executive coaching, there's leadership coaching, there's very specialized learning and development programs that HR puts out. What I found was it's the mid-career professionals that have the least amount of support from a professional development perspective. And another aspect that I'm very aware of and very involved with is the inclusion and diversity in terms of not just employees, not just their backgrounds, but also the kind of product. And a lot of times, especially in terms of hiring or promotions or promoting people at work, an excuse that I've always heard over and over again is a pipeline problem. And I quickly realized that it's not really a pipeline problem. The pipeline exists, but if there isn't enough attention, in time and intention provided to that mid-career pipeline to develop their skills in order to help them become better leaders or help them become suitable candidates for these senior leadership positions, that pipeline problem is never going to go away. And that's the market need and gap that I want to service by providing professional coaching services and targeted training programs to mid-career professionals in the IT field. And then I also realized that it's culturally diverse professionals, such as myself, for whom English may be the second or the third language, making their mark in a predominantly English-speaking world, in the technology world. There are many, many hurdles. And then on top of that, if you throw in the intersections and the intersectional identities of race, ethnicity, gender, class, which university you went to, and all of that, the hurdles are, they just multiply. So that's what I wanted to focus on. And that's my market that I'm servicing, be it with my coaching or my training, which are also available publicly. And that's the area I want to focus on with small and medium enterprises. So it's the same thing. It's again the mid segment, even in companies. Large companies have the resources and the wherewithal to set themselves up for managing and leading their transformation initiatives with a lot of planning and with a lot of strategy. Companies that are just starting out, there's a fair number of, the startup ecosystem is very strong, or at least fairly strong in most parts of the world. It's these small and medium-sized companies where there are tough situations with cash flow. If it's new, it's always that you're developing your product or your service just in time. You may acquire the client first and then go back and develop your product. So it's always focused on survival. But there's a lot of work that needs to happen. That's what I like to call the unseen part of the iceberg when it comes to transforming the way you work. And I found that small and medium enterprises could do with the most help. And so again, so that's how I arrived at my purpose, and that's the market need and gap that I want to focus on. How I operate, again, Scrum value of commitment, and again, to produce value incrementally. So focus is on progress, not on perfection. What is my value? My value as a solopreneur is my industry experience, my interdisciplinary industry experience, understanding of different cultures, having worked in multicultural environments all of my career. That is my value. And so my minimum viable product for my business venture is my professional coaching and training and consulting services that, again, I said, I started with the individuals because I realized that if I'm able to support culturally diverse mid-career technology professionals, I'm actually bringing more value and I'm still able to move in the right direction. So is that my perfect scenario? No, because I do want to have a balance. I have two customer segments, individuals and also organizations. So instead of choosing to target both at the same time, I've chosen to target the individual segment first. And as I iterate, receive feedback and iterate, there's a lot of intention in that. And the intention carries on in how I seek feedback. So I seek diversity in the people I reach out to. I seek diversity of perspective, of thought, of geography when I reach out and get feedback. And that's what has helped me sustain myself for the last 15 months. And the fact that I'm here today presenting to you is nothing but the power of LinkedIn and virtual networking. A friend of mine connected me via LinkedIn to someone who actually told me about the Female Foundry program that happened a few months ago, which is how I met Elaine, who's all the way out in the UK, who I've never met in person. And one thing led to another, and here I am participating in the Global Entrepreneurship Week, which I had never heard of about 4 months ago, until about 4 months ago. So being intentional in who you reach out to, and being intentional in not creating echo chambers, that's the key, in my opinion. And this is what my Scrum experience has taught me, and keeping in, learning from the Scrum values, the 5 Scrum values. This is how I've been able to figure out my own blueprint, if you will, for my solopreneurship venture. Any questions or comments before we move on? I'm just checking the chat here real quick. Okay, all right. So moving on, what can we learn from Kanban? This again goes back to limiting your working process, and visualizing all of your work. Those are the key principles. As a solopreneur, it's very easy for us to, our to-do lists are never ending, and then we have always something else to do, right? So the key is to stop starting and to start finishing. And this is what will put us on a path to progress and not perfection. So you're progressing in the right direction. And as long as we complete each item that we take on, that's the key. And this is some key principles on how to practice Kanban for yourself in your way of working, visualizing all of your work, because what you can see is what you can manage better, and limiting the number of pieces that you want to work on. The link here is provided where you can, for personal Kanban, for you to go and take a look. This is how a Kanban board will look like. You can create your own on Excel, on idea boards, or just on a piece of paper in your notebook. The idea is to really understand what your goals are, identify them, and then figuring out what are the different ways of achieving those goals, your options. And once you've identified that, what are you going to focus on a daily basis? And then you move them along. So this is how, once your work is visualized, then you have the ability to prioritize what you want to work on. What's the first thing that you need to do? And then move them along from one column to the next. And not only do you get a sense of satisfaction of having completed things that you really needed to do, but also the system allows you to really kind of stop, breathe, think, and then act, instead of just rushing to the entire to-do list as a whole. I also wanted to spend a couple of minutes on the importance of self-care and how the principles of Scrum and Kanban kind of feed into that as well. So the first aspect that I want to focus on was the distinction between time management and attention management. All of us, we tend to focus on managing our calendar. We manage our time. But really the key is to start managing our attention. Our energy goes where our attention goes. So it's not about how many things you completed, but how well you did them. Yeah. There are a couple of really powerful TED Talks on these topics. I've included the links at the end of this presentation. They're each 15, 20-minute long TED Talks. The other thing is to really focus on what the value you're bringing and what is the outcomes that you want. So again, goes back to managing your attention and really staying focused on the task at hand, doing only one thing at a time. The other piece, and this I read in a book called The Primes, every time something new pops up for you, it's very easy and very lucrative to say yes, but always keeping in mind what you've already committed to. So again, going back to the Scrum value of commitment, and once you've time boxed yourself and given yourself, I don't know, one day to finish designing this web page, you're not going to take on anything more unless it's an emergency. So saying no is actually protecting your previous commitments. So saying no, and no is a complete sentence by itself. So saying no really protects your previous commitments. Remember what your work in process is. You've already committed yourself to that. So before taking on something else, does it really need to be done now, or can it go into your wish list of things to do? That's the book I was talking about. The link is available in this presentation. Designing a self-care plan that works for you. Each of us is different. Each of us is unique. So understanding ourselves, becoming aware of ourselves, and what is the kind of self-care plan that will work for you. So the key is, and this is one of the key principles of Kanban as well, that you start where you are. When you're designing your self-care plan, becoming aware of how you feel. There are tools such as the feeling wheel that you can use to really get in touch with your emotions and acknowledge and accept them. How you're feeling is telling you something. Your emotions are data. That's what Susan David, the Harvard psychologist who's done pioneering work on emotional agility, that's how she describes it. Emotions are data, not directives. So that's the whole thing around sense and respond. You're not reacting, but you're responding. From a very tactical perspective, look at the top 5 things or people that consume your time. Then assess on whether that's energizing you or that's draining you. Each of these things, activities, people, right? And then figure out what you can do away with, the Eisenhower's decision matrix, urgent versus important. So do you really need to do it? Can you do it at a different time? Can you ask someone else to do it, or can you not do it at all? Yeah. Then identifying a few people, 1 to 5 people within your network, and as diverse as possible is better, to reach out for support. Who are those 2 people that you can call and have a conversation? Find mentors and include them in your self-care council, if you will. And I know in the US, it's Thanksgiving week coming up next week, and there's a lot of conversation around gratitude. But I think that, and I believe that making gratitude a daily practice is extremely essential. It's it's an essential component of my self-care plan, at least, and it's really done me wonders. So just wanted to call this out again. So again, design a plan that works for you. Start where you are. Get in touch with your emotions. Figure out what is it that you can stop doing, and what is it that you can delegate. Who can you bring in as your self-care, personal self-care counsel, and then practicing gratitude as on a daily basis. That's pretty much what I had for you for today. And I'm going to, pause now and open up for questions. But really, all I wanted to share with you was how adopting the principles of Agile and Scrum have really helped me in my solopreneurship journey, and some of the lessons that I've learned that I wanted to share with you today. How the values of Scrum around focus, commitment, respect, courage, and openness, and the focus that Kanban helps us bring by helping us discover our own guardrails for how we operate. So these are some principles, practices, and values from the world of software development and product development that I believe can help us as solopreneurs and entrepreneurs as well. So with that, once again, thank you very much to the Global Entrepreneurship Network UK and the Global Entrepreneurship Network worldwide for this opportunity and for organizing the Global Entrepreneurship Week celebrations all week this week.